Hi everyone, this is Cynthia from Bridget's Well in Casadega, Florida. I'm going to talk today in the Tarot's Major Arcana about keys number 1 and key number 2. Key number 1, the Magician, and key number 2, the High Priestess. So for key number 1, the Magician, what you get a sense of is somebody who knows and understands how to affect change and influence the world around them. What does a magician do? They try to work with energies, they try to work with the elements, they work with their magical tools, and they try to affect a change in circumstances or within the self, however you look at it. So what this card really speaks to a lot of the time has to do with how we affect change in the world around us, in ourselves, or in our lives. Some of the deeper symbolism, though, goes into, if you look at the major arcana as being that journey of consciousness and developing consciousness, what you have in key number 1 is the first influence of the masculine principle or divine masculine energy, but it's in form. So like if you think of a baby coming into the world, right? Typically, traditionally, the way we look at it is that infant's first representation of the divine masculine in the world around them and in their lives, influencing them, is a father figure, right? Or that masculine nurturing father energy. So key number 1 kind of represents that initial representation, has masculine energy work in terms of our consciousness, in terms of our experience. Masculine is the projective, the outgoing, the proactive, okay? In terms of consciousness, the part of your brain that does that is like the logical reasoning side of your brain, your mind, those functions. So there's a certain amount of intellectualism there. It's about having knowledge of things, how tools work, how energy moves, how things change. If I do this, then this happens. It's getting into that reasoning principle of understanding. And it's based off of, again, that projective, proactive, you do something and that influences a change or influences an energy, right? When you move into key number 2, the High Priestess, you have the feminine side of that. You have in one sense, it's intuitive and also emotional. The High Priestess typically represents the keeper of the knowledge. She's the one that has the book of secrets, okay, and how it really gets used. The magician is the doer. The High Priestess is the how, the energy of, in one sense, it's receptivity. That's very feminine energy. It's about being receptive to what's going on around you so that you can respond. So whether it be aware of your emotions and your intuitions, whether it be aware of the subtleties going on around you, and being receptive to that so that you can change your responses, so that you can turn around and say, well, instead of using this tool to get what I want, I'm going to use this one because the energy around me would be better changed by using this. And it's that intuitive response of some of the finer subtleties. So the High Priestess, representing the keeper of the knowledge. In dynamic alchemy, she's also known as the veiled Isis. Okay, so if we're working on, it's that internal state of being covered And when we're working in terms of dynamic alchemy, in terms of soul development, spiritual development, intuitive, psychic development, the development of the subtle levels of our consciousness, that feeds the actions that the magician would have done. Okay, you're looking at veiled Isis. She's the how. She takes the raw material and she formulates it and gives it back to you. So this is where the influence of your thoughts and your feelings and your belief structures, whether they be really good principles or whether they be false beliefs or limiting beliefs or what have you, right? She kind of weaves that internal web that says that when we do a thing, this is what the result is going to be. So she's that internal state of what happens within. Now, when you look at, say, for example, in many Eastern philosophies, like Chinese traditional medicine, or even Japanese, when you're looking at the yin and the yang, the duality of masculine, feminine, it's a duality of natures, right? We typically look at yin as the feminine and yang as the masculine. The yin being the dense, earthy, dark, internal, that kind of a thing. The yang being the light, bright, active, external, masculine type of an energy. Receptivity, activity. They consider yin knowledge to be book knowledge, book learning, and that kind of thing. And so when you look at the High Priestess card, you see her holding the scrolls, but she is not necessarily the book knowledge that comes with the reasoning mind. The reasoning mind is actually very active, and it's very proactive and reactive, and it takes emotions and impulses and it acts on them. She is the veil. She is the keeper of that knowledge, how you use that knowledge. So the difference between the magician being the yang, he can be impulsive. He can be that energy of just seeing something, wanting to change it and doing it. All right? In many instances, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if it comes from a place where there's a lot of limiting or false beliefs, it might not get the result that was desired. Or, you know, there could be nuances and subtleties that end up triggering more responses than just the one, more changes than just the one that the magician was aiming for, right? They were aiming for one thing, but they didn't see the ripple effect, the consequences of other things going on by working with that impulsivity. The yin side, the High Priestess side, she's holding on to that learning. She's the keeper of that yin knowledge, that book knowledge, that learning from experience, and that understanding. That might come from being instructed as opposed to experience, or it might come from experience, having worked with certain things and seeing what works and what doesn't, right? But she's the keeper of that. How is she the keeper of that? Is that she brings out some of those subtle influences. She calls you to pay attention to the subtleties, to stop, take a breath, look at things, to trust your intuition. If your intuitive guidance comes up, and it's that filter thing, so that we don't act too impulsively. So in terms of consciousness, these two cards really speak to that masculine and feminine principles, but in tandem. In terms of consciousness, they're talking about the development of both your reasoning and your intuitive knowledge within all of your experiences, and within everything that you do. When you look at them individually as cards coming up in a reading, what you're really looking at is having in the magician, having the knowledge and the skill in order to be able to influence and affect a change. However, you know, are we going to do that in a beneficial manner by paying attention to these more subtle influences, paying attention to our intuitions, by slowing down to take a look at all of the parameters of the situation before diving in? Or are we going to be more impulsive, manipulative, you know, going for that one thing, and we know how to get it that way, but we don't care what the other consequences or ripple effect would be? So you have those sort of like light and dark sides of the Magician card. And with the High Priestess, you know, in the tarot and reading, she's typically going to represent a certain amount of transformation that comes along with paying attention to your intuition, and paying attention to emotions, and sort of stepping up your game when it comes to examining what influences in my mind and in my heart are causing me to feel a certain way, to act a certain way. You know, what's the truth behind this? Can I dig a little bit deeper into myself to understand that, so that maybe I can behave differently, or so that maybe I can hear that intuitive voice? It's not, you know, your intuition might have one sound inside of your head in your internal monologue, and your ego might have another sound, and you kind of have that represented in the Magician and the High Priestess there. So when you're looking in a reading at these two things, you're looking at masculine and feminine, you're looking at your internal and your external states. They are both balanced within the state of your own mind, and it's those intuitions and impulses that would come out. And when you're dealing with one or the other, you know, that's where, when it comes up in a reading, you're trying to find that balance and what's going on here. So I leave you with that, and our next video will be keys 3 and 4, the Empress and the Emperor. More masculine and feminine energy. Go figure.